Let's be real here. The concept of superpowered individuals is kind of scary when you really break it down. Imagine if metahumans were flying around the cities we call home, bashing out the brains of criminals threatening innocent lives on a day-to-day basis. Don't know about you guys, but half of me is like, ah, awesome! And then the other half of me is like, anxiety-ridden existential crisis. That is scary shit. All that aside, we believe that there's some superheroes out there who are by far scarier than others, whether that is thanks to their aesthetic, personality, or just the way that their powers work. So today we are counting down a handful of them with our list of the top 10 superheroes everyone is afraid of. Let's get to it. In at number 10, SENTRY, the man with the power of 1,000,000 suns. That is definitely a description that could strike fear into the hearts of any mortal human, especially when it comes to a superhero who can transform into one of the most vile villains in Marvel history. When SENTRY is in his good form, aka SENTRY, he's fantastic to have around. Comparatively, on paper, he's more powerful than DC's Superman. But unlike the Man of Steel, he's got an evil alter ego known as the Void, who basically has the same powers as SENTRY plus some nasty additional tricks up his sleeve. When SENTRY first debuted in 2000 in his self-titled series, the character, Robert Reynolds, his human civilian alias, initially believed that he was just a mortal man, until he began remembering his superhero past. As the story unfolds, we learn that SENTRY's disappearance from the memories of the entire globe was a self-imposed exile, in an attempt to keep the Void at bay. Fortunately, that did not go as planned. Up next, number 9, Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter J'onn J'onzz has always had difficulty with public perception when in his true form. This is something that he's dealt with ever since his debut in Detective Comics issue 225 in 1955, in a story called The Manhunter from Mars. Yeah, that's not gonna make civilians like you much when you're the Manhunter from Mars. He's also a really nice guy though, so. In order to prevent mass hysteria, he ended up using his shape-shifting abilities and adopts the human persona of J'onn J'onzz, a detective from the fictional Middletown, USA. J'onn, despite being sweet-natured, calm, and collected for the most part, also has a terrifyingly powerful skill set at his disposal, making him one of the most powerful DC superheroes, and also incredibly underrated if we're being honest. Dude was one of the original members of the Justice League, so. He's got a genius-level intellect, has 9 senses, he can shapeshift, fly, is intangible, has a regenerative healing factor, heat vision, is telekinetic, telepathic, and so much more. Yeah. I can see why some people might be scared of him. Moving on to number 8, Ghost Rider. Dude has a burning skull for a head. I think it's pretty obvious as to why he's scary, or at least to the public why he's horrific. When Ghost Rider first hit the scene in 1972, it was in Marvel Spotlight issue 5, a story in which we got a supernatural anti-hero romp in which stunt motorcyclist Johnny Blaze gave his soul up to Satan in order to save the life of his father. That would backfire, no pun intended, with his father dying anyway, but Blaze became Ghost Rider, bonded with a demon called Zarathos. He is empowered by the spirit of vengeance and has an ability called the Penance Stare, which, upon making eye contact with his enemies, makes them relive all of the emotional pain and suffering they've inflicted on others in their lifetime, damaging their souls permanently in the process. Yeah. That is horrific. Speaking of demonically influenced characters though, that brings us to our next number. In at number 7, we have Spawn. Now, back when I was a little kid and Spawn was in the peak of his popularity in the 90s, which yeah, that kinda ages me a bit, I know, I was utterly terrified of the dude. For starters, look at him. Created by Todd McFarlane for Image Comics, Spawn is a character who began as a mortal named Albert Francis Simmons, a CIA agent who was murdered during a mission after being betrayed by his partner and best friend. Simmons is sent to hell but then makes a deal with the devil, agreeing to become Hellspawn if he's allowed to see his wife one last time. But he is stripped of his memories, his body is badly burnt, and he only recalls that his name used to be Al Simmons. Aside from that spooky origin story, the character is proven to have a whole lot of horrific tricks up his sleeve, including teleportation, shape-shifting, resurrection abilities, he's immortal to an extent, multiple demonic powers, he can manipulate energy and manipulate on a molecular level, and he's got all the superhuman skills from super strength to super speed. In other words, not a fellow you want to mess with. Also, his aesthetic in his comics and even his animated television show were just flat out scary, so just saying, friends. In at 6, Rorschach. The Watchmen character's actions spooked out his teammates in the critically acclaimed series. Most of Rorschach's crimebuster peers merely tolerated him, and his version of pleasant was still pretty off-putting. The worst part though? He's human. He has no powers. Everything Rorschach does is something that a mortal man is capable of doing. This gives his moving mask a more sinister metaphorical implication. Criminals see what they want to see, and that's usually pretty darn ugly. And let's be frank, you would not want Rorschach hunting you down because you know things are not going to go well. Recently, his reputation has drastically outgrown him, him, with the character becoming a twisted martyr figure, having been made the symbol that brought together a bunch of white supremacists in the new HBO series Who Wear His Mask. Funny enough, that crude nature aligns well with Alan Moore's initial intention for Rorschach. He was an intentional mockery of Charlton character Mr. A, created by Steve Ditko, who operated under the extreme black and white, and absolutely insane, philosophy of collectivism, more commonly known as the philosophy of Ayn Rand, which Ditko championed. Google it, it's true, and it's a whopper of a read if that kind of history lesson is your thing. In at number 5, the Spectre. There's a whole lot to be afraid of when it comes to DC's Spectre. For starters, let's just list off what this Golden Age hero's abilities are. He's immortal, he has omniscience, he's near omnipotent, can warp reality, has the ability to manipulate cosmic level energy, time and space, has cosmic awareness, limitless control over matter, superhuman strength of course, and he also knew everything about the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths before everyone else did, yet it still sucked. All in all, he's a threat not to be taken lightly. His original origin story, depicted in his debut in More Fun Comics issue 52 in 1940, gave us a glimpse at the mortal man he was before, Jim Corrigan, a hard-boiled cop who was brutally murdered while on his way to his engagement party. He was stuffed in a barrel filled with cement, which was then tossed into some water. But he was sent back to Earth by an entity called the Voice in order to eliminate evil and get that sweet, sweet bloody vengeance, which he damn well did. He's also known as the Spirit of Vengeance, the Wrath of God, the Man of Darkness, which are all apt and truthful nicknames. And according to his modern age update, he was the spirit during the plague of Egypt who went around and killed off all those firstborn children. Fun stuff. The character has had plenty of revisions over the years, FYI, but to this day he has remained one of the most morally ambiguous superheroes, whose stories often raise ethical thought-provoking questions. Moving on to number 4, Homelander. Homelander can easily be likened to an evil version of Superman. After all, he is an analog for the DC legend, but stands apart from the Golden Age hero thanks to his nuanced complexities and violent outbursts. Homelander is often described as an amoral megalomaniac, superhero, and a sexual predator. Essentially, he was modeled after the Man of Steel, but made to be a more cruel and violent character who has tossed all sense of what's ethically correct to the wind. Those who are privy to his true self beyond the mass marketing of the Seven know what he's really capable of, and generally avoid conflict with him at all costs. There's very few individuals employed by Vought American willing to put their lives on the line like that. Now you can even fear him in the live-action Amazon Prime The Boys series. But fair warning friends, when Homelander goes off the rails or chooses the less ethical route, it makes for some major destruction and damage. And feels. It's entertaining, but also really scary if we're being honest. In at number 3, the Hulk. Uncontrollable anger, gets stronger the angrier he gets, is almost impossible to defeat when he's super mad, generally OP. Yeah, that pretty much sums up the Hulk, and gives you a pretty solid idea why some heroes, villains, or civilians would prefer to avoid the big green monster altogether. So much so that once upon a time the Avengers actually shipped him off into outer space because he became so uncontrollable. That went down in 2006 as part of the lead up to the Planet Hulk story event. After a gamma bomb goes off and causes the Hulk to lose his marbles and then go on a rampage in Las Vegas, the Illuminati decide that he's too dangerous to have kicking around on planet Earth. So they decide to pull a fast one on the big green guy by having him enter orbit to destroy a rogue satellite. But really, they use this as an opportunity to use a shuttle to jettison him away from our solar system, intending for him to land on a peaceful planet. Of course, that backfires and he goes through a wormhole, ending up on Sakaar instead. And when he does get back to Earth, he ain't happy. Moving on to number 2, Scarlet Witch. Hey, if you could alter the very fabric of reality, you'd probably have a lot of people scared of you too. Scarlet Witch's inclusion on this list should be no surprise. One of the character's primary anxieties in both the comics and her MCU adaptation is that regular humans fear her. The MCU Wanda was responsible for the deaths of innocent civilians in the opening conflict of Captain America Civil War, which also spawns the Sokovia Accords to better regulate superpowered individuals. And in the comics, she altered the fabric of reality multiple times. When you got that much power, yeah, people are gonna be scared of you. Especially when you have trouble controlling that power, just saying. And finally, in at number 1, Batman. When dude has no superpowers yet everyone is terrified of him, including his peers, that says a lot. Batman just has that effect on people. The reason Batman is feared is a multifaceted one. For starters, his hardened and non-negotiable morals cause him to be rather brutal towards criminals at times, despite following a no-kill rule. Arguably, for some criminals on the receiving end of his actions, death might be a more comforting option. There's no leniency there, and while some of his peers might consider him a party pooper, at the end of the day, Batman is usually always right about what's right. Second, he's always prepared. If you're going up against the Caped Crusader, you know your odds are pretty bleak, so yeah, you're going to fear him. In addition to that, Batman has pulled off some pretty terrifying stunts over the years. Aside from his typical lurking in the dark and catching criminals off guard, he's also done things like lock up a villain in a room with no food or water or means to escape. That happened happened in Batman issue 420. The villain was KG Beast, a Soviet assassin sent to murder 10 government officials. Gotta love the Cold War era comics. In JLA Tower of Babel, it was revealed that Bruce had come up with backup plans to dispose of his Justice League peers if they ever stepped out of line. He made Aquaman aquaphobic, and like, dude needs his water, you guys. For a mortal man, the lengths Batman is willing to go and the things he's capable of surely have some of the most powerful beings in DC's universe shaking in their boots. Or at least hella wary of him. Alright, there we have it, friends. What other characters do you find terrifying? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know your thoughts. If you guys dug this video, you know what to do. Spread that love, hit that like button, share our video with a friend, and hey, why not subscribe to Top 10 Nerd? We'd love it if you stuck around some more. In the meantime, thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video. So today we're counting down. We're doing something today. We're doing something. We're gonna this list up. That's what we're gonna do.